Welcome back to Malaysia's ASEAN Moment, a limited series on the 2025 ASEAN Chairmanship, diving into Malaysia's approach and priorities from a policy perspective. I'm your host, Angeline, and this is the final episode of the series, where we take a step back to reflect on Malaysia's year as ASEAN Chair, the milestones we achieved, and what lies ahead. Joining me today is Datuk Prof. Dr. Muhammad Faiz Abdullah, the Chairman of ISIS Malaysia. Datuk Prof. Faiz leads the Institute's policy development and Track 2 diplomacy, including through the ASEAN ISIS network. He also serves as Malaysia's representative to the ASEAN Regional Forum Experts and Eminent Persons. Thank you very much, Datuk, for joining us today. Now, at the start of 2025, Malaysia took on the ASEAN Chairmanship at a time of heightened geopolitical and also economic uncertainty. And as the year went on, new challenges also kept popping up. The earthquake in Myanmar, the Thai-Cambodia border clash, even trade tensions with the introduction of the Trump tariffs. Yet, Malaysia's leadership managed to steer ASEAN through these headwinds and keep the focus on cooperation and stability. And as we look back on this eventful year, a question that I keep in my mind is, how will Malaysia's time as ASEAN Chair be remembered? So, Datuk Prof, what to you has Malaysia done this year that will stand out as a lasting legacy in ASEAN?
I think we're talking about a bit of retrospection here as well. There's this great saying, Recherche à la du temps perdu, which is the recollection of time past. But we're dealing with time present as well. I think your question has quite a bit to be unpacked. It calls, for example, a little bit of arbitrary prioritizing of achievements, and at the risk of being a bit biased here, I would have to say right at the top would be the achievement with Malaysia being the chair for ASEAN as the accession of Timor-Leste, formally into as part of the, in this case, the 11th ASEAN member state. And I use the word formally in the sense that I do believe that Timor-Leste has already been within ASEAN. Definitely in spirit. The question is just the structure. And you're looking at cumulatively the efforts put in by all the ASEAN member states. And just at the right point where Malaysia takes the chair for 2025, we finally see the formal accession. Now, I was there just about a month ago with the Prime Minister, with the official visit, and there were bilateral talks. You could feel the vibes, the excitement, that enthusiasm with which the leaders and the people, knowing that they will be joining formally ASEAN. And you can sense that level of, I should use the word gratitude, that Malaysia has put so much effort into it. So that counts as right at the top. Without seeming to belittle the other achievements, and I think right at the top two here, you could not exclude the inaugural trilateral summit. And we're talking about ASEAN, GCC, and China. That was a great achievement. There was the last summit in May, and there have been quite a bit of plaudits on this. I think the main point about this summit is not because of its novelty value, although novelty value does matter here. It is the fact that you have a combination of such dynamic forces coming into play. ASEAN GCC itself is formidable. Now, with China into the play, you can imagine the magnitude that's being amplified in the exponential growth of the limits that can be expanded here. So I would count that as a second major achievement. I would also not exclude the fact that we have been doing very well in terms of what we would call the ASEAN Community Vision.
Of course, 2045.
Yes, 2045. I have said before, plucking the low-hanging fruits is one thing. I mean, you see, you got to grab it. But what's the longer play here? The longer play here is to see that there is a strategic elongation of the objectives and the achievement of that. I think that would count as another major achievement. Happily, that it always falls within the year that Malaysia takes the chair. It may be a coincidence, but that certainly counts as one. It will be talked about later. And it's already been written about why it is so important to have the realization of this, not now, but in the years ahead as a follow through. So I think that would more or less complete the top of the line thing. But I am told, and I think this could be quite important too, that it has been quite exceptional that we in fact had a joint meeting in relation to AEM and the AFM. ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting together with the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting being done together. I think the significance here is that it breaks the cliched image that ASEAN can only prosper to the three pillars, as if they are going to be well demarcated. And I think this joint meeting goes to show that you have the political and security so-called category merge with the economic category. And
That's
that
very
is a good
interesting.
start, the way I look at it.
If I can follow up on some of your
Sure.
answers, ASEAN GCC-China, that's something that everyone has been talking about and everyone has been wondering about. What exactly was Malaysia's vision with ASEAN GCC-China? What are we trying to achieve here with this inaugural trilateral?
What we're trying to do is to show that the superpowers, the major powers, need not necessarily be singing their tune on top of a hill all by themselves. Which is why, prior to this, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim wrote a letter to President Trump, inviting them and proposing the idea that they should have one as well, meaning that there will be an ASEAN, a GCC, plus the United States. Parallel to this, of course, it will be done in terms of the second summit, which is forthcoming. Whether or not it materializes is not the point. The point is that the whole idea is to involve these two major powers to add value to the already existing exponential growth that we are seeing. So China coming into the picture would add a lot of depth. Technologically very much advanced. Economic funding in terms of financial infrastructure just as good as the GCC, as you know, pretty deep pockets. And ASEAN right into the picture with this mix of youth and the excitement and the enthusiasm that goes with the development. So I think this all combined to make it a very, very good formula.
Do you have hope that this trilateral will continue to be picked up by other chairs?
Not only hope, it is my firm belief that it will carry on one way or the other. Malaysia has set this great precedent. It would be a calamity if it is just be left as one. Of course, you need efforts. You need some other things like centrality later. Perhaps we can talk about that will need to push the matter through. There should be a follow-through all the way. This will be a question that will be holding on the successor to Malaysia for the coming years ahead.
Of course, Timor-Leste has a lot to gain for joining ASEAN, but what does ASEAN have to gain from Timor-Leste's membership?
Great question. Indeed, what has Timor-Leste to gain and what does ASEAN to gain? I think the question to be rephrased, if I might use John F. Kennedy's, ask not what Timor-Leste could do for ASEAN, ask what ASEAN could do for Timor-Leste. And this is not purely academic, Angeline. We do have this theme called inclusivity and sustainability. What is inclusivity? If we are not prepared as one existing group of 10 ASEAN member states with its big wealth accumulated from being number 5 and going to be number 4 as the biggest economic bloc in the world, if we cannot afford to accommodate, in this case, Timor-Leste. We know there's great economic asymmetry among the ASEAN member states. And this is where I believe the bigger ones must not only feel that they should allow Timor-Leste in, they should actually go out of the way to welcome it. And here I think Malaysia plays a very crucial part in showing what I would consider to be geo-economic magnanimity and the foresight to include this. You mentioned earlier that Malaysia has got a tendency. In this case, I think it is a very good habit. After all, being in the members, you have to cultivate certain habits, and these are habits which should be promoted and should be prolonged and carried on. That's my answer to that.
Let's move on to all of the challenges that have arisen this year. As we all know, there have been no shortages of challenges this year. with so many crises unfolding, things like the border clash with Thai and Cambodia, uh, the Trump tariffs, so many things has happened. How did Malaysia step up to the challenge while maintaining momentum on our chairmanship goals?
It's said that it doesn't rain, but it pours. To answer your question, I think the key word here would be soft power. That's number one. Soft power as manifested in the case of the leadership that we have. And how do I say that it is manifested there? I think it inheres in the case of the sense of agility, the confidence building in the person of leadership. And I have to say again, this case of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. So that would be a point of reference when we talk about how we have really achieved and managed to navigate the treacherous waters of geopolitics. You mentioned about the border crisis, Myanmar, and all that. I think it's important to clearly state here when we talk about crises here, it's not the case of being repetitive. Yeah, it has happened before, but in this case, thanks to the agile leadership, the way Anwar Ibrahim is able to pick up the phone and call on the leaders straight on with cutting through the bureaucratic red tape and making it more a question of friends consulting with each other, that has basically been the main area where we could consider that to be a feather in Malaysia's cap as chairman. That is one. I would also imagine the case of the way we reacted because of the quote-unquote, the Liberation Day tariffs. It's quite a bit of an oxymoron here. You have Liberation Day and you have tariffs. But I have said it before. I like to alliterate it because it's Trump, it's tariffs, Trump, tariffs, tariffs, and more tariffs, and even more tariffs. How did we react? We reacted not in historical fashion. Very cool. Got in all the economic ministers to sit down. And whether you like it or not, the record would show that this had a cooling effect, a rationalizing effect on the market, because it's important. Whether for real or whether for whatever reason, you have wrong actions and you have knee-jerk reactions, that's what happens. Negative impact on the market as such. And because of this cool way of reacting to it, we had a way of calming down the situation. And I think that is really something that should be accounted for as one of the great achievements in spite of the crisis that was facing us.
Sounds like the answer you're giving is really that it is firstly the leadership, but also it's the ability of ASEAN to really cooperate with each other in times of crisis. Would you say that ASEAN unity has been strengthened this year?
It's a bit touchy here, because when you mention the word unity, I immediately correlate it with the term centrality. There's always this problem that centrality is being seen and used as a mantra whenever it is convenient to cite it. At the risk of sounding like a cynic, quote-unquote centrality is still a working formulation. It has been talked about much often. I say that with the sincere belief that it should be worked on, but I also say that with the caveat, the centrality must be supported not by just words, but by action. And action here is to be manifested in terms of the cohesiveness with which the ASEAN member states react or respond to a situation. Myanmar itself, we don't see that centrality the way we want it. We saw centrality initially in the formulation of the 5-point consensus. But once that was settled and we saw that the junta did not accede to the most important clause, number one, which is to stop killing their own people, we did not find the same kind of force in centrality to tell the junta, stop it, or we will kick you out. In fact, nobody said it until Anwar Ibrahim came to the picture when he took over early part of 2023. And he said it in Bangkok, and he said it again in Beijing, knowing full well the general perception that Beijing was supporting the junta, rightly or wrongly, and the recent reports seem to reinforce that suspicion, yet he made it clear and along the way. But now that we are chair, you have to soften the position. Soften in the sense that you want to try to move the needle to see some form of resolution towards eventually getting peace, getting unification among the disparate people. Bearing in mind, of course, the junta is not the starting point of Myanmar problems. You can ask anybody, Myanmar has always been a problem. And that's the whole reason why we invited them. We took the initiative to have constructive engagement and finally to get them in. Along the way, as you say, you can only determine to a certain extent. History has its way of taking its own course. And here, we try our best to resolve it.
Maybe we can move on to the next question. And here's a question that we assess for every ASEAN chair at the end of their term. What did we set out to do but was not able to fully realize this year?
That's a tough one again. I think one thing for sure is the efforts to revitalize, I hate to use this term, the Jurassic institution known as the East Asia Summit. I mean, the earnestness with which the motivation that was to formulate this was there. But as it went on, with the passage of time, it turned out to be that occasion was a usual script reading, each member state saying what they want to say, and each party in the summit wanting to say their piece, saying their piece, and that was it, without real interaction, without a real will, and maybe even a proper agenda to see specific things being done. So as it went on, I think it's, in a way, sort of like went into a state of comatose for not being effective. And we were trying to get this thing to be some sort of a revivification of that spirit, to get it going. As you say, Rome was not built in a day, and in this case, you cannot rebuild the purposeness of the East Asia Summit with just 1 year of being the chair. It will need greater effort, and that's one area that the chair would need to hopefully make sure that the successor will be able to carry through.
Sure. Now, talking about the East Asia Summit and how it needs revitalizing, what do you think is actually the problem that's handicapping the East Asia Summit? Is it why is this consensus not strong and impactful? Is it possibly because there is a lack of participation at the highest levels, for example, with the Russian and American presidents, maybe even President Xi himself? He doesn't typically attend the East Asia Summit. Or is it more bureaucratic than that?
I think it goes far beyond bureaucracy. And I think we could be involved in a bit of a, logical circuitry here, because you're right in pointing out, is it because the leaders don't participate? And the question is, why is it that the usual suspects are not there? It goes back to that question. I think the fundamental problem is you're dealing with a situation where you have to juggle with massive overtones in geopolitics. Let's put aside Russia, even without the Ukraine-Russia issue. You have ascending power, which is China, and you have an existing apex power, the United States of America. Hate to sound like I'm trying to revive history here. Thucydides' principle says that whenever you have an existing power and the possibility of a power rising, challenging this, massive friction will be the consequence. And it is this, I think, which is the stumbling block to have this East Asia Summit, which is practically a world summit if you look at it. All the powers are there.
Yes.
And to get it going, which is basically to try to play the game of getting these major powers into the picture. No one is prepared to concede. You mentioned correctly Xi Jinping. Why is he not there? He's got other things in mind. Now, you've got the SCO, apart from BRICS, you've got the other things, and you've got the BRI. America is trying to do this thing again, even before Trump, and now with Trump, you've got all kinds of things. I don't want to go too deep into that. We don't want to be seen to be singling out any major power for bashing. I would put both powers, it is incumbent on them to sit and get the act together. that would be the day we could actually move the East Asia Summit.
All right. So as we wrap up this episode,
My God, are we there yet? That's soon?
unfortunately,
I don't even have time to refer to my notes.
you've been doing a wonderful job at that. It comes so
Yeah.
naturally to you.
Okay.
As we wrap up this episode, this series, and also this ASEAN Chair year, let's look ahead towards the future. What should Malaysia continue to work on with the next chair? Is there a particular issue or area where continuity will be key?
Absolutely, there are many areas, in fact, to just like, put my finger onto one would not do justice to the actual problems that we have. Geopolitics is the art of the possible. And here we must look at continuity in the efforts to deal with Myanmar. We have to make sure that the successor will carry it through. I have been one of those who have been really pushing the idea that the permanent so-called envoy should not be restricted to 1 year. And it's a contradiction in terms. You want to talk about permanent envoy or the fixed envoy, you limit it to 1 year. Things are just about getting to be really settled, and then you say it's time for you to go, and it's a new one. The continuity is a big problem here. So you need to get that resolved. Myanmar, even as reports coming in now, about renewed fighting and all that, but it could be skewed by Western media to blame on a certain power, of which I will not name. But definitely, since we have moved and we've taken great pains at trying to move the needle here, that should be one of the major things that should be done by the successor. I think the other thing that concerns us would be trying to prolong this thing I told you about the inaugural summit. It should be carried on, in addition to the merging of the overlapping lines. This great thing about categorizing the political and security with the economic, that should be carried on. We already had that as a first ever, a momentous occasion that Malaysia was the chair, and we had this thing going on, which is the meeting together of the ASEAN foreign ministers together with the economic ministers. That's something really key. I forgot to mention that, not sure, I think once this podcast is being aired, it would have already been after the second summit is over, which is going to be in a few days. I would imagine that it would be the very first, of course. You could say that Timor-Leste would be seen to be, I didn't want to use a past tense. I just wanted to use a future tense here. By the time we are viewing this, it could be past tense, that major moment. And that should not be the end of it, surely. The accession is not the end all and the be all. It's the very beginning. All member states should gather together to help it out without disregarding the role that has to be played with the CVLM. Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar. Of course, it's a bit of a misnomer now to include Vietnam. It's one of the fastest. But still, within that category, there's a lot to be done. And I think those are some of the things that must be carried through without, feeling that we have achieved everything. So in order to, like you say, to end this year with a bang, what we have is that we have got these achievements in spite, and I have to underline this, in spite of the many challenges.
Yes.
The prepare for the headwinds ahead and to have dealt with the headwinds that we did not expect. I think Malaysia, by all accounts, has been able to do a tremendous job. And thanks to the soft power they had, thanks to the leadership that we have, and thanks to the camaraderie that has been able to be articulated and actualized by the Prime Minister with the other leaders of the ASEAN member states.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Datuk, for your unique insights. It has been such a pleasure to have you, and to have you also wrap up this entire series, not just this episode, but this entire Malaysia's ASEAN Moment series.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
I enjoyed every second of this.
Thank you very much. You've been listening to Malaysia's ASEAN Moment, an ISIS Malaysia podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and LinkedIn at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, ISIS Malaysia, for more insights into our chairmanship year.